I started using LtoJ 6 years ago. It was an idea presented to me by a fellow teacher before even our district decided to implement LtoJ. So I heard this idea from a fellow teacher, and then learning from this math teachers, the school started wanting all of us to do LtoJ. And so that's how we started.
So it started in the math department?
Started in the math department, and when this idea was presented to me, my first question was, well, of course, if there is graphing involved or if there is data involved, it would be very easy to do in the math department. But how do people in other classes implement it? I teach Spanish, upper level Spanish, so that was my first idea. But then someone said, well, there's another teacher in family consumer sciences who's using LtoJ. Why don't you visit with her about it? And that's how I started becoming more interested in LtoJ. And then, of course, we attended our trainings, and I started implementing it right away. Teachers always think, well, but if they're going to do LtoJ in every one of their classes, is it going to be boring when it gets to your class? But it's like any other practice. Books are used in every class, and you need them for every class. Calculators, your board, anything they might use in other classes, but that doesn't mean because they use it in other classes that you cannot have an interesting twist in your personal class. Now, what I've learned is that even though teachers, many teachers do LtoJ in our district, most teachers do LtoJ in our district, you start putting your own spin, your own flavor, if you will, because you do things your way. Your personality comes across. The way you celebrate for your all-time bests, the way you get information, the feedback you give them, that is part of your personality. And so in that sense, it is unique. Now, it does help that students do it in other classes. It doesn't hurt, it helps, because students they're used to that concept of having LtoJ and not being for a grade. They're used to all these things. They're used to the graphing. So that part is not intimidating for them, for the mere fact that they have done it in other classes too.
So it's a benefit.
It is absolutely a benefit. It's absolutely a benefit because they have, and you know, in education, previous knowledge always helps. So when you present LtoJ, when I present LtoJ to my students the first week of school, and I'll give them their essentials for LtoJ, there's no intimidation. They're not intimidated by it. They're not scared by it because they know it's a common practice in our district. So it does help. And it helps you also because of the way you do LtoJ. You can also be unique in certain areas if that is a concern from a teacher.
So what is the part about LtoJ that you like the very best? Do you think it's the most beneficial to your students?
The part I like the most about LtoJ, it's all the principles that really changed the way changed my way as a teacher. There are many LtoJ principles that I apply now without even thinking about them. For example, not starting our year reviewing. That was, I teach Spanish 3, 4, and 5. And before I started doing LtoJ, I would start every one of my classes every year of Spanish 3 by reviewing what they did in Spanish 1, and then reviewing what they did in Spanish 2, and then continuing. Then I did the same thing for Spanish 4. Now, what I learned about LtoJ and all this time and energy wasted in education, reviewing what should have been learned from a different teacher, that changed the way I taught. Because from the moment I started doing LtoJ, I do include essentials from other classes. However, I don't start my year reviewing. And that has allowed us to have more time to teach what's really important. Now, that means, of course, that the teacher before me and the teacher before her, we each have to do our part. It's not that the principle itself of no reviewing can be applied if you don't do LtoJ. It can only be applied when you do LtoJ because then the teacher from the year before guarantees that her essentials are covered, not only covered, but learned. That means I don't have to spend my the first part of my year reviewing, because I know for a fact what they learned. I can get a list of those essentials, and I can count on those students knowing that. And that allows you to concentrate on your essentials and have more time to go deeper and learn more. That was essential. The other principle that I've applied from the beginning, it's the principle of giving students their essentials from the very beginning, but not only that, giving them the questions of what my tests are going to be like. So when my students walk into my class, I do give them their essentials and their questions that I'm going to use in LtoJ, and they do have the answers also. And they know that at the end of every quarter, they're going to have a test, and the test will be their essential questions test. So they know, and we know, that even though they're going to see the whole test, by first quarter, they should know about 25% of that test. Then by the end of the semester, we should be hitting 50%. Of course, give and take, because some years, you have to spend more time here or there, but our list of essentials, which is a year-long test, will be my final at the end of the class. Now, even though those tests will be for a grade, it's only LtoJ, and by doing LtoJ, that we have practiced them enough, so at the end of the year, I'm confident giving them a test that has all the essentials. That's something else that changed the way I taught. And the third and most important part was demystifying. Before, I thought grades were the most important tool to motivate students. I thought really when students were more motivated if they had an A, or if I gave them an F, they were motivated to learn and not pass, but just learning how students grades motivate only 50% of your students, and how LtoJ motivates a lot more than that, 75 or 80% of your students. I could say in my classes, maybe because of the population I have, but I could say that 90% of my students are motivated by their score, getting their all-time best, seeing their progress on their graph. A lot higher, that's a higher percentage, than the kids are motivated with a grade. And so that's something else I think that we forget as teachers, that we want students to learn and they want to learn. And you can experience success without having to receive a grade. And that's probably one of my favorite principles too.
Everybody knows how excited kids are when they start kindergarten. And then gradually that enthusiasm for school goes down and down and down and down. Talk about that. I mean, how can you compare the enthusiasm your students have for school to what a kindergartner would have for school?
Now, since I work with high schoolers, I get them at the end of their academics. I get them when they are thinking about graduation and college. And there are two things that I've learned. One is that intrinsic motivation can be developed whether you are a kindergartner or a high schooler or a senior in high school. But it does have to be very intentional. Now, unfortunately, once I have my students, I've gotten them when they've been burned, and some of them they've never been successful. Some of them can walk into my class saying, I'm bad at this. I'm not I'm not good for this. So sometimes I get them when they have already been labeled, or in their mind they're labeled. Now, but something that you're able to overcome in a class intentionally is to develop their intrinsic motivation. And that intrinsic motivation is something in which they just want to be successful. Now, my high school students will be as excited as any kindergarten to get a thumbs up or a sticker or colors in their graphs. They are excited as any other learner. And so it'll be based on how we approach our teaching that we can develop and help them gain motivation and help them be motivated to learn, not to receive a grade, but to learn. And something very important that LtoJ gives you is that ability to just be a coach and not always a teacher, and just be a coach. And for them, when they are in a sport and their coach tells them, good job, that's good enough. But we sometimes forget about that. We forget that our students only want to hear that. A good job, let's get a sticker, let's hug each other, tell your partner good job, and that is enough because that brings your enthusiasm for learning up, and that helps you feel successful, and that's something else we have to build into their character.
Do you hear your kids saying they're cramming for their final, or do you think from the LtoJ they already know the information?
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to? What happens?
Now, a lot of things happen at the beginning of the year. When I give them their list of essentials and their list of questions and also the list of answers, sometimes kids will say, so let me get this straight. So this is what you're going to ask me in the test. And I'll say yes. But are these the same questions? Yes. So if I know this, I'm going to be fine. Because somehow we've trained our students to think that an evaluation is a secret, that they should not even know the answers or the questions prior to that. So that is something that will change their mind. I have to change their mind once they're in my class and I tell them, yes, this is a list of essentials. This is where we need to be. This is our map. This is our roadmap. This is our path. And about the end of the quarter, we're going to be in question 1 through 25. And then by the end of first semester, we're going to be here, and by the end of second semester. Now, second semester, something happens. So they will ask me, so Ms. Velasco, our final would be just like the LtoJ, right? Oh, that's easy. They think it's easy. They don't see it now as intimidating. Why? Because they've done it enough. We've practiced for it. Now, even though LtoJ is not for a grade, but LtoJ is what's going to help them do well in your class. If you've picked the right essentials for LtoJ, if you pick something random that has nothing to do with what you do in the classroom, that's when LtoJ doesn't work. Now, even though you're not grading LtoJ every week when you do it, but it will have a big impact in your grades and their student success. Because once you've practiced, and by practicing and practicing, for one, they know for a fact is important. They know for a fact that I'm not trying to trick them. They know for a fact that if they do well in LtoJ, it's taking them to that end of the road that we've had for them. And it presents it in a non-threatening way at all. Parents appreciate it a lot. Parents always want ways to help their students. And so for them to know, okay, you have this list of essentials at the beginning of the year. That's what you're going to learn in your Spanish class. There's no secrets. There's no hiding it. So that's why it's not stressful for them, and they appreciate it.